The roar of the engines mixed with the pounding rain against the aircraft's windows, creating a sound that was impossible to ignore. Outside, the sky was nothing but darkness lit up by violent flashes of lightning. Passengers whispered nervously, gripping their armrests as the Boeing 747 shuddered under the force of the storm. Some prayed quietly, others pretended to be calm, and a few even typed farewell messages on their phones, convinced this might be their last flight. Suddenly, a trembling voice came through the intercom. It was the co-pilot, his tone breaking with fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a critical emergency. Captain Harris is unconscious, and I need immediate assistance from anyone with military aviation or fighter pilot experience." The words sliced through the cabin like a knife. Panic spread instantly. Parents clutched their children tighter. A woman cried out, and a man in a suit muttered, "Oh, this can't be happening." The announcement had confirmed everyone's worst fear. The person responsible for guiding this massive jet through one of the worst storms on record was no longer able to do so. And the only other pilot left was already on the edge of losing control. In seat 22A, near the window, a woman stirred. She had been asleep, her head resting lightly against the glass, her breathing steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Her name was Maya Carter, and at 35 years old, she had mastered the art of sleeping anywhere, an old habit formed during long deployments in places where rest was a rare luxury. She opened her eyes slowly, not out of curiosity, but because something in the co-pilot's desperate tone triggered an instinct she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a call for help. It was the unmistakable sound of a young officer drowning in fear. Around her, nobody even looked her way. Their gazes shifted toward the front of the plane, as if expecting some heroic figure to stand up from the crowd. In first class, a businessman with polished shoes and an expensive watch whispered loudly to his wife, "As if anyone qualified would be here in economy." He adjusted his tie with a smug certainty that no one on board could possibly meet such extraordinary qualifications. Maya didn't move right away. She sat quietly, observing the fear, the panic, and the disbelief on the faces of those around her. To them, she was just another passenger, a black woman in simple jeans and a plain blouse, traveling alone. No one suspected the truth. No one imagined that hidden behind her calm expression was a past filled with missions, combat skies, and secrets that could save them all. The plane jolted violently, throwing drinks to the floor and drawing screams from terrified passengers. The storm wasn't waiting, and neither, Maya realized, could she. Maya stood slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. The aisle was trembling under the turbulence, but she moved with the steady balance of someone who had walked through chaos before. Eyes turned toward her, some curious, others skeptical. To most passengers, she didn't look like someone who belonged in the middle of an emergency. She looked ordinary. And that was exactly why whispers started spreading. "Where she thinks she's going?" a man muttered. "She can't possibly," another woman whispered, shaking her head. The co-pilot's voice cracked again over the intercom. "Please, if anyone has combat aviation training, I need your help. I cannot fly this aircraft alone in these conditions." Before Maya could reach the front, a man from first class rose confidently, puffing out his chest. He wore a designer suit, polished Italian shoes, and an air of arrogance that filled the cabin. His name was Jonathan Blake, a wealthy businessman known for his sharp tongue and even sharper pride. "Listen here," he shouted toward the cockpit door, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've flown on dozens of private jets with my brother-in-law, who is a pilot. I know what I'm doing. Let me in, and I'll handle it." A flight attendant rushed over, panic flashing in her eyes. "Sir, Please sit down. We need someone with actual military aviation experience. Civilian flights won't be enough in this storm." Jonathan smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Are you doubting me? Do you know how much I paid for these first-class seats? $15,000. I'm not some tourist. I have more experience than anyone on this plane." The arrogance in his voice made several passengers nod nervously, as if money could equal skill. And just as he tried to push past the attendant, Maya's calm voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "I'm the one you need." The crowd turned, staring at her with a mixture of disbelief and judgment. Maya's simple jeans, plain blouse, and natural hair tied back didn't fit the image of a hero. To them, she was just a regular woman. Jonathan laughed bitterly. "You got to be kidding! This plane is in the middle of a death storm, and he pointed at her with exaggerated disdain, you think you're going to save us?" Maya didn't flinch. She reached into her small carry-on bag, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and handed it to the flight attendant. Inside was her Air Force identification, Colonel Maya Carter. 510 hours of flight time in F-22 Raptors, decorated for navigation in extreme conditions. The cabin fell into stunned silence. Some passengers gasped, others whispered in disbelief. Jonathan's mouth hung open, but no words came out. Maya's eyes remained steady, her voice calm and unshaken. "I've flown through worse storms than this. I've brought my squadron home when the manual said it was impossible. If you want to live, you'll let me through that door." For the first time, the panic in the cabin quieted. The flight attendant, trembling, stepped aside. And Jonathan Blake, still fuming, realized that his money and arrogance had just been outshone by a woman he never thought twice about. Maya placed her hand on the cockpit door. Behind it, a storm awaited, but inside her, a storm was already rising. One of memory, injustice, and the strength to prove everyone wrong once again. The flight attendant unlocked the cockpit door with trembling hands, and the heavy door creaked open. A blast of noise filled the cabin, the sound of alarms blaring, warning lights flashing red across the instrument panel, and the storm's fury pressing against the metal walls of the jet. For a moment, passengers caught a glimpse inside before the door closed again, cutting them off from what felt like the edge of disaster. Maya stepped inside with quiet authority. The scene was worse than she expected. Captain Harris was slumped in his chair, convulsing slightly, foam at the edge of his mouth. The medical kit lay unused at his side. The co-pilot, James Wilson, barely in his 30s, sat frozen, hands trembling over the controls. His face was pale, his uniform drenched in sweat. I can't," James stammered, his voice breaking. "Yes, you can," Maya interrupted firmly, her tone slicing through his panic. "But you're not doing this alone." Her calmness stunned him for a moment. He looked at her as if seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" She leaned forward, scanning the control panel, her eyes moving with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Colonel Maya Carter, United States Air Force, fighter pilot, extreme condition navigation specialist." She adjusted the altimeter, then glanced at James. "Now tell me, altitude and speed." He blinked, as if testing whether this was real. 38,000 feet, speed 450 knots, crosswinds 120 kilometers per hour, gusting to 160. "Good," she said sharply. "Now keep those numbers updated every 30 seconds. I'll handle the rest." Outside, lightning lit up the sky like a battlefield. The aircraft shook violently, and the alarms screamed louder. Maya strapped herself into the captain's seat, her movement steady, her breathing controlled. Her hands danced across the switches, adjusting power, stabilizers, and navigation, each movement smooth, precise, like muscle memory. From behind, Jonathan Blake's voice bellowed. He had managed to push past a crew member and force his way halfway into the cockpit. "This is madness! You're letting some woman from economy class take command of a Boeing 747? Do we even know what she's doing?" Maya didn't even turn her head. "Mr. Blake, this cockpit is no place for tourists. Sit down and fasten your seatbelt before you make my job harder." Her dismissal cut deep. Jonathan's face flushed red, his arrogance crumbling under her absolute composure. The co-pilot, however, straightened for the first time. Something in Maya's tone, calm, commanding, unshaken, ignited a spark of confidence in him. "James," Maya continued, eyes locked on the storm ahead, "we're not getting around this weather. It's too big. We're going through it." His jaw dropped. "Through it? Colonel, that's against every safety protocol. Protocols are written for average pilots. We're not average today. We're going to do the impossible because the alternative is death, and I don't lose people." Her hands tightened on the controls as the jet lurched again, plunging several feet before leveling. Behind them, Jonathan finally went silent. Even he could see it. Maya wasn't pretending. She wasn't panicking. She was built for this. And in that moment, every soul on the plane unknowingly placed their lives in her hands. The cockpit trembled under the storm's fury, but Maya's hands never wavered. She adjusted the yoke, recalibrated the stabilizers, and silenced 2 of the alarms with quick, precise taps. Her calmness was almost unnatural, like she had lived through chaos far worse than this. Co-pilot James glanced at her, still doubting, but slowly giving in. "Colonel, with all respect, you're treating this like a combat mission. This is a passenger jet, not a fighter plane. The systems don't respond the same way." Maya's lips curved into the faintest smile. "James, let me tell you something. In Kandahar, I once flew a rescue mission through a sandstorm so thick I couldn't see my own wings. My navigation system was dead, 2 engines gone, and missiles were still in the air. Every manual said eject and abandon the mission. But I had 17 wounded soldiers depending on me. And you know what I did?" James swallowed hard. "What?" "I brought them all home." The way she said it, quiet, steady, without pride, sent a chill down his spine. For the first time, he believed her fully. This woman wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't bluffing. She was speaking the language of survival. Behind them, Jonathan Blake still lingered at the cockpit door, muttering to himself, "This is insane. Anyone can memorize war stories. She's bluffing to look important." His voice carried the same arrogance, but even his wife, sitting just beyond the doorway, finally snapped. "Enough, Richard," she hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself. Look at her. Look at the way even the co-pilot listens to her. Do you think anyone on this plane cares about your money right now? Sit down before you make us all look like fools." Jonathan froze, stunned that his wife had spoken against him. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, sinking back into his seat in silence. For the first time in years, he had no words. Maya ignored him completely. Her focus never wavered. "James, I need you to monitor vertical speed. Crosswinds are going to shift in the next 5 minutes. When they do, we'll spiral down through the eye." James's eyes widened. "That's never been done in a 747. It's impossible," Maya cut in. "Exactly why it'll work. The eye is calm compared to the walls. If we stay in these outer bands, this plane tears apart in minutes. We dive into the eye, we buy ourselves a chance." The intercom crackled suddenly. A voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through. "Civilian aircraft, identify yourself immediately. You're entering restricted airspace." Maya grabbed the radio. "This is Colonel Maya Carter, U.S. Air Force, call sign Spectre, taking emergency command of civilian Boeing 747. Captain incapacitated, medical emergency in progress, request priority clearance, and immediate weather updates. There was a pause, then a stunned response. Spectre? Confirm identity. Is this really you? James turned toward her slowly, eyes wide. They know you? Maya didn't answer. She just pushed the yoke forward slightly, guiding the jet into a descent path that no civilian pilot would have ever dared attempt. And in that moment, James realized the truth. This wasn't just a pilot. This was a legend sitting beside him. The intercom crackled with urgency. Spectre, this is Commander Rodriguez, Andrews Air Force Base. We've been tracking your flight. Entire airspace on the East Coast is closing down due to this storm. Confirm. Are you actually piloting a commercial 747? Maya pressed the transmit button, her voice steady and commanding. Confirmed, Commander. Captain incapacitated, co-pilot inexperienced in these conditions. 312 souls on board, requesting priority clearance and immediate weather updates. The line went silent for a second, and then came the response. Colonel Carter, the Pentagon has been notified. You have top priority. All military bases are clearing airspace for you. Every eye is on this flight. James froze in his seat, staring at her in disbelief. The Pentagon? You're not just any pilot, are you? Maya kept her eyes on the instruments, not letting the weight of the words distract her. Labels don't matter, James. What matters is getting this plane down in one piece. But in the passenger cabin, whispers began to spread. The flight attendants couldn't contain it. The military had confirmed her identity. A young man in coach repeated the words he overheard. She's not just a pilot. She's Spectre. An elderly woman gasped, covering her mouth. I read about her. The mission in Afghanistan. They said she saved an entire squadron when the desert swallowed them whole. Others started murmuring, piecing fragments of news stories, rumors, and half-forgotten articles. Slowly, awe replaced doubt. But Jonathan Blake, red-faced and furious, wasn't ready to surrender his pride. He pushed himself back up, voice dripping with venom. Are you people insane? You're trusting your lives to some story? Legends are just that, stories. Look at her. Does she look like someone who belongs in first class, let alone a cockpit? The cabin grew tense again, but before anyone could respond, the intercom clicked on. Maya's voice filled the plane, calm, unwavering, almost soothing against the thunder outside. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Carter speaking. I've assumed command of this aircraft. We are flying through a Category 5 storm, but I want you to listen carefully. I have faced conditions worse than this. This in war zones with fewer resources and no backup. You are not alone. You will follow all crew instructions, remain seated, and trust me. I will get you home. The effect was immediate. The sobbing quieted. Parents held their children with renewed hope. Even the terrified faces in first class softened slightly, as if her words had carried some invisible shield into the cabin. Jonathan tried one last desperate laugh, forcing bravado. Oh, she sounds convincing, but words don't land planes. He was cut off by Dr. Patricia Chen, a neurosurgeon sitting nearby, who stood with quiet authority. Mr. Blake, enough! I've seen hundreds of soldiers in operating rooms, many of them alive only because this woman flew them through hell. You may not believe in her, but I do, and I suggest you sit down. Jonathan's face went pale, his arrogance finally cracking. For the first time, he looked less like a wealthy man in control and more like a frightened passenger facing a truth money couldn't change. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Maya began her calculations. Her eyes flicked between instruments, her brain mapping patterns of wind, pressure, and storm cells like a chessboard only she could see. "James," she said firmly, "we're not fighting this storm. We're going to use it. Prepare for controlled spiral descent through the eye." James swallowed, his hands trembling again. "Colonel, no one's ever done that with a jet this size, not even in simulations." Maya tightened her grip on the controls, her eyes locked on the wall of lightning ahead. "Then today, James, we make history." The storm hammered the jet with a fury that felt almost alive. Lightning exploded in the clouds around them, illuminating the faces of terrified passengers who clutched their seats and whispered prayers. The 747 trembled under the strain, each jolt threatening to tear it apart. But in the cockpit, Maya Carter sat with perfect focus, her hands steady on the controls as if she had flown this storm 1,000 times before. "James," she said calmly, "monitor vertical speed. I need constant readings." He glanced at the instruments, his voice shaky. "We're descending at 2,000 feet per minute." "Good," she replied. "I'm taking us to 4,000 per minute. The only way through is down." James's eyes widened. "Colonel, at that rate the airframe will hold," she interrupted. "Trust me." Her tone wasn't arrogant. It wasn't a guess. It was certainty born from years of facing the impossible. And for the first time since the storm began, James believed. The radio crackled again. "Spectre, this is General Hayes from the Pentagon. We're tracking you on radar. Are you attempting a controlled spiral descent?" "Affirmative," Maya answered without hesitation. "It's the only option. The storm walls are closing. If we stay level, we're finished." There was a pause. Then Hayes' voice came back, astonished. "Colonel, that maneuver has never been attempted in a jet that size, not even in simulations." "Then we'll write the manual after we land," Maya said, her voice firm, unshaken. The jet tilted, banking into the spiral. Passengers screamed as gravity pressed them into their seats, drinks and bags tumbling across the cabin. The overhead bins rattled violently. In first class, Jonathan Blake clutched the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. His wife, Victoria, stared ahead in silence, lips moving in quiet prayer. Back in the cockpit, James read the instruments aloud, his voice steadier now. "Vertical speed, 3,000, 4,000, airspeed holding." Maya adjusted, her eyes scanning the turbulence like a hunter tracking prey. "That's it. Keep feeding me the numbers. Don't look at the storm, look at the data." The plane dove deeper into the eye. Outside the windows, lightning forked in brilliant white streaks, reflecting against walls of swirling clouds. It looked like the end of the world. Yet inside the cockpit, there was only the calm rhythm of Maya's commands. "Spectre, this is Andrews Base. We've cleared Dover Air Force Base for your landing. Runway prepared, emergency crews waiting. But you must hold this descent perfectly. One mistake, and the turbulence will rip you apart." Maya's jaw tightened. "Copy that. I've flown through worse with less. Hold the line." Then she spoke not into the radio, but to James. Her voice dropped lower, more personal. "Do you know why they call me Spectre?" James shook his head. "Because in combat, when everything goes black, when every other pilot ejects, I'm the one who stays. I'm the ghost that brings people home." The jet shuddered violently as another gust slammed into it, but Maya didn't flinch. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her mind locked on one goal: survive the impossible. And for the first time, James understood. He wasn't sitting next to a pilot. He was sitting next to a legend.
The entire aircraft. Children cried. Adults gasped for air. The cabin lights flickered as if the plane itself was fighting to stay alive. Every sound, the rattling bins, the groaning metal, the thunder outside, felt like a countdown to disaster. In first class, Jonathan Blake was drenched in sweat. His expensive watch slid loosely on his trembling wrist. For the first time in years, He didn't feel powerful. He felt small, helpless, and utterly terrified. He tried to bark orders at the crew, but his voice cracked like that of a frightened child. "She's going to kill us! This is suicide!" His wife, Victoria, turned to him with eyes full of something colder than the storm outside. Disappointment. "Jonathan, look around you. Everyone is terrified, but they're trusting her, not you. You're not saving anyone. You've done nothing but complain." Her words hit him harder than the turbulence. For once, he had no comeback. He sank back into his seat, trembling, realizing he wasn't the man he thought he was. In the cockpit, Maya's concentration was unbreakable. Her eyes tracked the instruments, while her hands moved like they were part of the plane itself. James, feeding her updates, could barely keep up. Altitude 28,000, speed steady at 460, vertical speed 4,200 per minute. "Good," Maya said, her voice calm against the chaos. "We're piercing the storm wall. 10 minutes to the eye." The jet lurched again, tilting so hard that trays and cups flew across the aisle. Gasps echoed through the cabin. A passenger shouted, "We're going down!" Panic erupted until Maya's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. This storm is powerful, but it's predictable. I've seen worse, and I've survived worse. We are not going down. We are going through. And when we reach the other side, you will be alive because you trusted me." Her words rolled through the cabin like a wave of oxygen. Breathing steadied, sobs quieted, even the children calmed. It was as if her confidence reached out and wrapped itself around every passenger. James glanced at her, awe plain on his face. "How can you stay this calm? We're flying blind, pushing limits no one's ever tested." Maya didn't look at him. She kept her gaze forward, her voice low. "Because fear doesn't fly planes, James. Focus does." Another violent drop shook the aircraft, and the cabin erupted in screams. Jonathan clutched his seat with shaking hands, whispering a prayer he hadn't spoken since childhood. He looked toward the cockpit, his pride cracking under the undeniable truth. The woman he had mocked, the woman he had dismissed as unworthy, was the only reason they weren't already falling from the sky. In that moment, Jonathan Blake finally understood. Money couldn't buy competence. Privilege couldn't replace skill. And prejudice could be fatal. But Maya Carter, she was their only chance of survival. And with the storm tightening around them, their fate rested entirely in her hands. The storm raged with a vengeance, but Maya's eyes never blinked. The cockpit glowed red and amber from the warning lights, the instruments screaming in protest. James called out the numbers, his voice tight but steadier now, anchored by the calm presence beside him. Altitude 23,000, speed steady at 460, vertical speed 4,200 per minute. "Good," Maya said, her voice calm against the chaos. "We're piercing the storm wall. 10 minutes to the eye." The jet lurched again, tilting so hard that trays and cups flew across the aisle. Gasps echoed through the cabin. A passenger shouted, "We're going down!" Panic erupted, until Maya's voice came over the intercom. "Breathe. Stay in your seats. The eye is minutes away. We're not dying today. We are going through. And when we reach the other side, you will be alive because you trusted me." Her words worked like glue holding the fragile hope of 300 people together. Even Jonathan Blake, trembling in silence, stared ahead with wide eyes, realizing he was witnessing something greater than arrogance or pride. Then it happened. The violent shaking eased, the howling winds softened. A strange calm fell over the aircraft. Outside, the passengers who dared to peek through the windows gasped. They had entered the eye. The storm surrounded them like colossal walls of swirling darkness lit by occasional flashes of lightning. But here, in the center, it was eerily calm, almost beautiful. The 747 floated like a fragile bird inside a cage of chaos. James let out a shaky breath. Altitude 20,000. Vertical speed steady. Colonel, you did it. Maya didn't smile. Her eyes stayed forward, scanning, calculating. Don't celebrate yet. The eye is only a pause. To get out, we have
To pierce the other side, that's where the storm hits hardest. The radio crackled. Spectre, this is General Hayes. We're tracking your descent. Unbelievable work. Entire Pentagon command is watching. You've got a clear path to Dover Air Force Base if you can make it through the other wall. Maya responded without hesitation. Copy that. Prepare your crews. We're coming in hot. In the cabin, whispers spread again. She did it. She actually did it. Mothers hugged their children tighter, tears streaming down their faces, but for the first time they were tears of relief. Hope flickered where despair had reigned. But Maya knew better. She tightened her grip on the controls, her jaw firm. James, the second wall will be worse. The winds converge, pressure spikes, and turbulence doubles. This plane isn't built for it. James swallowed. Then how? We use the storm against itself, she said. A maneuver no manual teaches. If we time it right, the currents will carry us through instead of breaking us apart. James stared at her. You've done this before, haven't you? Her eyes, steady and fierce, finally shifted toward him. Not in a plane this size, but I've done it in war. And I don't plan on losing anyone today. The calm of the eye surrounded them like a false promise, but everyone knew what waited ahead. The second wall. The real test. And for the first time, even Jonathan Blake bowed his head, silent, humbled, praying that the woman he underestimated could do the impossible twice. The calm of the eye didn't last long. Ahead, the second wall of the storm loomed darker and angrier than the first. The swirling mass looked like a living monster waiting to crush them. Even the bravest passengers who peeped through the windows recoiled, whispering prayers under their breath. In the cockpit, James's hands trembled again. Colonel, the turbulence data shows this side is twice as strong. If we hit it head-on, the fuselage won't survive. Maya finished for him, her tone sharp but calm. That's why we're not hitting it head-on. We're riding it. James blinked. Ride it? Maya leaned forward, eyes locked on the storm. These currents move like rivers. If we catch the right one at the right angle, it will sling us through before the turbulence rips us apart. It's like surfing a wave. Only here, the wave is trying to kill you. The radio crackled again. General Hayes's voice filled the cockpit. Spectre, Pentagon confirms winds at 180 kilometers per hour, hail the size of baseballs. No commercial jet has ever attempted this. Do you copy? Maya pressed the transmit button. Copy, which is why we are going to succeed. Keep Dover ready. The jet approached the wall. The calm ended in an instant. The first gust slammed into the plane like a giant fist. The aircraft jolted violently, alarms blaring again, passengers screaming as oxygen masks swang and luggage tumbled. Angle 30 degrees left, Maya shouted. James repeated her orders, adjusting secondary systems as she pulled the yoke. The jet tilted hard, skimming the edge of the storm wall instead of charging straight into it. The turbulence roared, but Maya's hands were steady, her focus unbreakable. She guided the 747 like it was an F-22, coaxing it, not fighting it. Vertical speed 5,000, James yelled. Hold it steady, Maya commanded. Wait for the pocket. Outside, lightning tore across the clouds, lighting the cockpit like a battlefield. The storm screamed as if angry at being challenged.
The plane shook so violently, passengers thought the wings would snap. Then, suddenly, Maya spotted it, a narrow current swirling differently from the rest. To anyone else, it looked like chaos. To her, it was a path. "There!" she barked. "James, brace. We're going in." She banked the aircraft sharply, aligning with the current. The jet lurched, but then something incredible happened. Instead of fighting the turbulence, the plane seemed to lock into its flow. The shaking didn't stop, but it shifted, less violent, more controlled, like a boat caught in a powerful stream. "We're riding it," James whispered in disbelief. "It's working." The passengers, though still terrified, felt the difference. The plane wasn't fighting the storm anymore. It was moving with it. Screams turned to stunned silence, then scattered prayers of gratitude. Jonathan Blake, clutching his seat, stared toward the cockpit with tears in his eyes. For the first time in decades, he felt genuine humility. The woman he had mocked was carrying him and everyone else through the impossible. Altitude dropped fast. 10,000 feet and stable, James yelled. Maya's jaw tightened. "Good. Once we clear this wall, Dover's runway will be waiting. Hold on, people. We're almost home." The storm roared one last time, a final furious attempt to keep them trapped. But Maya Carter didn't yield.
Suddenly, the sky opened. Below them, through scattered clouds, the lights of Dover Air Force Base shone like salvation. And in that instant, every passenger knew they were going to live. The storm finally loosened its grip. Below, the runway lights of Dover Air Force Base stretched like a glowing path through the darkness. The passengers gasped at the sight, some crying openly, others clasping their hands as if seeing heaven itself. After hours of terror, those lights meant life. In the cockpit, James's voice trembled, but this time with relief. "Altitude 5,000, descending steady. Colonel, runway is clear." Maya nodded, her face calm, almost unreadable. "Good. Flaps 20, prepare for final approach." Her hands moved with fluid precision, every adjustment exact. To her, this wasn't just landing a plane, it was completing a mission. She guided the 747 as though it were an extension of her own body, reading the winds, the descent rate, the way the massive jet responded to her touch. The radio crackled. "Spectre, this is Dover Tower. Emergency crews ready. You'd have absolute priority. Welcome home." For the first time, a faint smile touched Maya's lips. "Roger that, Dover. Let's bring them in." As the runway drew closer, the plane shuddered one last time under crosswinds. Gasps filled the cabin. Jonathan Blake clutched the armrest until his knuckles turned white, whispering, "Please, God, please." But Maya didn't flinch. She steadied the descent, leveled the wings, and guided the jet with a mastery that silenced every doubt ever spoken against her. The wheels screeched as they hit the runway, sparks flying, brakes screaming under the weight of 300 lives. The aircraft shuddered, slowed, and finally, mercifully, came to a halt. For a second, there was silence. And then the cabin erupted. Cheers, sobs, applause thundered through the plane as passengers unbuckled and embraced each other. Some shouted her name, others simply cried, overwhelmed with gratitude. James removed his headset, staring at her in awe. "Colonel, you didn't just land a plane, you rewrote history." Maya exhaled slowly, unbuckled, and stood. "No, James, I just did what needed to be done." The cockpit door opened, and the passengers saw her emerge, calm, composed, uniform still simple, nothing flashy. Yet to them, she was no longer just a woman from economy class. She was the reason they were alive. Jonathan Blake stood shakily, his pride in ruins. For once, he couldn't hide behind arrogance. His voice cracked as he spoke. I misjudged you. I thought—" Maya stopped him with a look, her eyes steady, her voice cutting through the air. "You thought wrong. Remember this, Mr. Blake. Privilege doesn't land planes. Competence does." He lowered his head, humiliated, while the rest of the cabin erupted again in applause for her. Hours later, the world knew. News outlets called it a miracle. The Pentagon confirmed it wasn't just a pilot who had saved the flight, it was Spectre, the living legend. 6 months later, Maya Carter was promoted to Brigadier General, the youngest black woman in history to hold the title. Her storm navigation technique was added to training manuals. Her story filled headlines. And a generation of young pilots, especially women of color, found new hope in her name. As for Jonathan Blake, his arrogance had been broadcast to millions after passengers' videos went viral. His business collapsed, his reputation ruined. He would never forget the day he realized that prejudice wasn't just ugly, it was deadly. And Maya? She didn't need revenge. Her legacy was enough. Standing at a podium months later, in full uniform, she spoke to new cadets at the Air Force Academy. Let them underestimate you. While they waste energy doubting your worth, use that time to sharpen your skills. Because when the storm comes, and it always comes, competence speaks louder than prejudice. The applause that followed wasn't just for her, it was for every storm she had flown through, every life she had saved, and every barrier she had shattered.